and then do a quick sound check. Just test. Okay, I think that works. I'm going to just up my volume a little bit. All right, so thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Reentering the Workforce, presented by Seton Hall's Career Center and Alumni Relations. My name is Erica, and I will be moderating today's session. Our presenter is Bob Franco, and I know he has a guest with him, so I'm going to allow them to introduce one another in a little bit, but just a few reminders and notes about our next hour together. Please know that if you have a question during the session, we encourage you to ask it. You don't have to wait until the end for your questions. You can either raise your hand by clicking the hand icon on your screen, or you can simply type the question using the question or chat feature on your screen. Another thing I just wanted you to all be aware of is that slides may be delayed, so thanks for your patience. And if you need any assistance during the presentation, use the question or chat feature on the right sidebar, or again, you can raise your hand function using that hand icon, and I will reach out to you in a private chat. So now I'm happy to introduce our presenter today, Bob Franco.
Thank you, Erica. It's a pleasure to be here. Before we get started, I want to encourage everybody on the call to really ask questions. We purposely have not put a lot of content into this presentation. We're hoping that a lot of the content comes from the audience. To get started, we're going to start with the question about why are we here? When we're talking about leaving the workforce, what does that really mean in terms of returning to the workforce? And there's different reasons out there. Some folks are searching for things in life. Some folks leave the workforce because they have family obligations or other types of obligations. Some people leave the workforce because they are passionate about something. And some people leave the workforce or don't enter the workforce because they just want to be a rock star, right? And with that, what I'd like to do is introduce our guest today, special guest, Natasha Comas. And Natasha, would you mind just, from when you graduated back in 2006, talk about your history, about how you pursued your life.
Well, thank you for that. Kind of funny line right there. I like that. I was a junior in school, and I think I was already starting to work a lot in entertainment. I was working with American Apparel, doing campaigns. So I think I noticed by that time it was kind of hard for me to stay in the workforce mentality. And I had always been doing this on the side, doing, in studio, being a studio musician, recording. And it kind of just opened itself to me. The opportunity came about, in bigger ways. So I guess by senior year, I was kind of just trying to finish school. I didn't want to take off and say, if I take off a year, who knows when I'll come back, because I knew what it meant to leave that workforce mentality. It was going to take every bit of my inner self and energy to do anything and succeed at anything. So I did what I had to do. I finished and in 4 years, and I still got my bachelor degree. And then I kind of had that attitude that, all right, I have my degree and I can come back to this whenever I want.
Yes. Now, you had a very interesting career. I mean, those of you, who are on YouTube will find a lot of content that Natasha's put out there. Some very professional videos. She's had some hit songs. She's actually where we sort of to get to know each other better is her music that she does comes out of time when I was listening to music back. We have very similar tastes in music. So, what was that like, being an entertainer?
I'll say it was almost like a very bipolar switch from being, in school, and then all of a sudden, you've got to give it your all. Like I said, you have to switch over. I mean, to have the band, to open up for these classic rock bands and stuff like that, it really took everything you had. There is no way you can give half at that point in time. You have to make a decision. Now, where I am at now, I think I'm doing a little bit of both, but that kind of happens, like, let's say I'm 30 now. When you're 24, that's that age where you've got to give it all at whatever you're pursuing, whether it be your dream or, a job or an internship. You really got to give it that all at that time to build anything, and it took about 7 years to really build, to have the plan. and be able to, just check everything off like a list and say, okay, at the end goal, I want to be opening up for Sebastian Bach of Skid Row or Bret Michaels or something like that. That was an end goal. It seemed impossible at first, but there's a whole array of situations that have to happen in order for you to achieve that. And we did it. I picked the guys. You have to pick the band. You've got to have the right producer. You have so many trials and tribulations you're going to go through, and you have to give time for that.
Did you actually at the time, so many of the folks on the call are looking for what I would assume are traditional careers. Did you see yourself as being in a non-traditional career? I mean, did you actually, when you think about people who are, marketing people, sales people, accountants, lawyers, did you see yourself as very different from that world, or did you see yourself as just part of the employment world?
No, at the time, I definitely did see myself nowhere. I didn't want anything to do with an internship. I had that kind of attitude like, oh, wait, this is my internship. It's my internship to be my own boss, to kind of lead my own business, if you would say. That's kind of how it was. So I didn't really want to work for anybody. And now I tend to look at things a little different, because when you do that for 10 years, you come back around, and then everything kind of changes. It's like that other balance of that organized self working for someone in the workforce. Mm-hmm. You kind of need that to balance yourself out. Too much entertainment, honestly, I don't know that I can handle it. Like, I think I'm a little bit more intricate than just doing that. Like, I wasn't, I wanted to do something that was organized. The entertainment world can be very disorganized and all over the place, even though it's fun. But you need some sort of organization, and that's why I came to you, and we worked on the resume and kind of went back into the workforce a little bit.
Right. So let's talk about that. So when people are outside of the workforce, when they technically leave or dissociate from the traditional workforce, what's going on there? This thing is crazy. Okay. So what is actually going on there? There is, you hear people say, well, I've left the workforce, and then they're trying to get back in, but they've been away for so long that they're feeling like they don't fit in, or that they're feeling irrelevant. I could tell you from my own personal experience, I had a time when my career took a left turn for very different reasons from yours. My career kind of got sidelined with the whole 9/11 issue, and a lot of people end up losing their positions at the time, and then you're kind of like, well, what's left for me? Like, I lost my title, I lost my company, and those kinds of things, and you sort of feel like, do I fit anywhere? Then in your case, with making such a dramatic different change, are you pigeonholed? Are people looking at you in a certain way? My guess is, when you're feeling that way, that people are not responding to who you are, that you're more likely to not take action than to take action to move a career forward, or in your case, maybe you just kept doing what you were doing, right? What was the emotions that you're feeling when you first started thinking about, making a switch?
Definitely, you do go through a lot of emotions, and I think it happened after I had achieved what I wanted, and maybe I wasn't really ready. For some reason internally, I said, I don't know if I can keep going as I am right now. There's a certain part of me that also needs to be filled. There's a certain part of me that I need to understand, and maybe it means going back to my roots. Maybe it means going back to my school days. Maybe it means using my brain and not just, entertainment and, these crazy outfits. And yeah, people did start to look at me a certain way, and I had a problem with that. Mm-hmm. It was like, oh, this girl is just this rocker, wild, and it's like, no, you don't understand. Like, I graduated from Seton Hall University. I was an honor student my whole life, and I kind of felt like that was being dismissed, and I did have a huge problem with that. Mm-hmm. So I think I really followed my gut on that, and I said, I'm going to take a break because that is important to me too. And so I did. And I was kind of unattracted to just living my life as just an entertainer, and I was just like, you know what, I want to do more for this world. I want to be more than just that person. How am I going to do this? So then I came to you, and I was like, okay, I felt irrelevant. I didn't even think, I had all the confidence in the world to be on a stage, but to be in an office or to work for somebody, I felt like I had no idea how to do that anymore, because I had taken 10 years off of my, that career.
So for those of you on the call, you dialed into this call because you're probably trying to re-engage in something. So just think about the degree of difficulty that Natasha is basically setting up as her goal right now, is going from one world, which is very different from the world that she's possibly going to end it in down the road. So, I must say she's taken some pretty remarkable first strides, but let's kind of get into why. What's the decision, why somebody would want to do this? Some folks, just in your case, you might just be, tired of what you're doing or exhausted from the schedules, or maybe just looking to do something different, or thinking that there's more to life than what you're doing at that point. And my impression was that all of those were sort of things that you were feeling.
Absolutely. And I think that's when I told you that, that 25% of me was kind of like, all right, or maybe it was 50%. At this point, I'm still figuring that out. I'm still in that whole, figuring out stage. And I did feel like there's more to life than this. I set out to achieve that goal of, okay, I want to be in that rock and roll world, and I want to be that lead female. Why? Because I knew I could do it, and because I had passion for the music. I wanted to kind of bring it back. I love classic rock. I knew I could do a good job at it, an amazing job, and we did all those things. But then you kind of, it's like with any goal. You reach it, and then you're kind of like, all right, well, now what? I didn't plan ahead. I only planned for that, and I kind of felt like I had been, again, just missing out on the other sides of me. And like you said, it's a great slide right there. You have, these are all me. So what do I do when it's all me? There's different parts of me. I'm not just this one-sided person, and this goes the same way for someone in the same situation or opposite situations I'm in. Mm-hmm. You find yourself saying, okay, maybe for those who have been in the workforce, and they want to maybe find themselves. They want to travel the world for a year. These things happen. It's normal. You want to spiritually understand yourself to another degree. And so for me, it happened just backwards. I had done all the traveling and the craziness and the meeting celebrities and all this stuff, and I kind of just said, oh, wait a second. I want to do the simple thing, because I feel like that's how I'm going to balance myself out.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So now we get into how do you start? Where do you go from all this? And we've had some. We were fortunate enough to meet. We came to meet, and we talked about a lot of the things that you were doing as a manager of your business actually were transferable out there into the business world. And you started to expand your network and meet people outside of your industry that you were in. So let's kind of talk through, because I think this is where most folks on the phone are saying, well, how do I do this? How do I make the change? What were the things that you tactically went through to kind of increase your confidence?
Well, first I had to get myself out of that mindset, that rock and roll mindset, and it's like a shock. You're like, oh wow, what did I do all these years? I kind of had to have someone like you sit down with me and show me the skills that I had actually attributed that whole time. If it wasn't for someone helping me in the career center here, I probably would have thought, oh, I'm just a useless, washed up like rocker or something, which is so not the truth. And, we sat down and it was my first resume, let's put it that way. I never had a resume for 10 years because the resumes that I had were all entertainment related. And it wasn't anything like, okay, what kind of work experience do you have, in terms of paper, the way that the, regular workforce, would work. So I had to kind of put that on paper, and I guess reading it made me feel more confident. Number one, I was like, oh, okay, so I haven't just been this entertainer this whole time. I've actually been managing most of this stuff. And I definitely felt more confident with that. And then, attending the career festival and, all those events and things like that. And then, of course, you meet some people. And then I guess it leads you to your next, what your next question would be.
Right. So just to kind of skills. So think about what Natasha had to do. She was managing a band. She was hiring people. She was paying people. She was dealing with vendors. She had crews producing her MTV videos. These are all business skills that are the mark of a business manager, the mark of an entrepreneur. And yet what you were saying is at the point you weren't thinking about yourself that way.
Not at all.
But these are all skills that are incredibly desired by the quote-unquote traditional world. We have a question?
Yeah. a question just came in. What are some strategies to get noticed for a possible job in your application?
Could you repeat that?
What are some strategies to get noticed for a possible job in your application?
So when folks are, let's say, going to something different, right? So it's really not, so whether you're going to the exact same job or a completely different sort of job, the process is not dissimilar. The first thing to be aware of, and I have to say, Natasha is a great example of this because she was successful in her business, is what are the indicators of success? So the fact that you have success could be financial, so it could be new revenues. In your case, it could be amount of people who buy your music. So it could be customer acquisition, loyalty around customers. It could be your ability to increase the quality of a service or a product. It could be, depending on the industry you're in, how do I build a brand, which is something that you did as well. So understanding the output of your energies is the most important thing, because wherever you go, whether you're a rock star or whether you're a pharmaceutical salesperson or whether you're managing a circus or running a nonprofit, all of the indicators are the same, and that's where you start your conversation. Are you somebody who could drive results in some shape or form? And then the second thing to take a look at is what are the skills that you have? So, for example, managing, vendor management, for example, something that Natasha was doing. So what are your analytical skills, evaluation skills, selling skills, management skills, directing skills, researching skills? So when you're describing your jobs, you don't describe them as if they were the jobs that you used to have. You describe them in terms of the job that you want. You make your past sound like your future, right? And you have to present yourself as if you've already lived in that future. Does that answer the question? I hope I continue that. So that was a very good question, and feel free if you have a specific circumstance you would like either Natasha or I to respond to. So in your world, in your progress so far, you've had some initial success, right? We're not going to say that we're done. We're not done. All right. So there's been some initial success. So talk about what you've done to start to create this bridge.
So to create the bridge, I didn't go full force and say, okay, let me, all the skills that I'm used to doing for my own business, let me go right away into the workforce. I expect to be the president of this. I kind of honestly just needed to start small. I needed to start at a level where I could start gaining the people skills again. Not dealing with the kind of community that I was used to dealing with for 10 years, let's say. It's not the same thing. You're dealing with a whole other kind of brain. It's not about being entertained any longer. It's about actually using my skills and, being commended for those skills. So I took a sales position with Victoria's Secret. There was a new store that opened up, and I went to the career fair, and they were there, and I kind of was interested because, I'm all about fashion and all that kind of stuff, and I said, I know I'm a good salesperson, and I need to be able to wake up every day and feel professional. That was one of my biggest things. How I was able to dress meant a lot, because the other stuff was I never felt professional. Therefore, even though I was a professional, I didn't look like, I said this is business, and I kind of wanted that. And so I'm able to do that with Victoria's Secret. And I'll say it's been almost a year now. And something, that job basically has how do I say, kind of like recharged me back to, the career, way of thinking, It was very different. It was something that I guess I didn't know that I could do, and it took a lot of time to acclimate to it. I wasn't used to having to be somewhere at a certain time, but that's what I was looking for. I didn't want that free, independent life anymore. Do whatever you want. You can do the show if you feel like it. It was too much freedom, and I think I got kind of like overly like, just paranoid about like, oh my gosh, this is too much of the free world, I kind of need some control. And I think it's helping, actually, because I don't know if you have this in the next, one step at a time. The next slide maybe talks about how, as I'm doing this, I'm still realizing that I still want to continue pursuing the other thing. But I kind of needed this in the process to clarify that vision of mine, because you lose sight. After 10 years, you might lose sight, and you might need to try something for a year. You don't stop doing what you're doing, or what your goal is, or what you were doing for those 10 years, but you kind of look at it from a different angle. And so that's what happened. It's given me a different perspective as to how I should target this with the music or the entertainment. How should I really do it this time around? I'm building a new set of goals for maybe the next 5 years or 10 years now.
Yeah, I'll give you another example. I had a gentleman come in a few months back, and he was an accounting background. And somewhere mid-career, he made a decision because he had two parents that were very ill. So he decided to leave his job and be full-time caretaker for his mom at the time it was. And I met him after 8 years of him doing that. And then he came to me and said that he wanted to get back into what he was doing. Well, that's a very interesting thing, because I think, Natasha, you kind of picked this up quicker than most. If you did this 8 years ago, you may view yourself as an accountant, but the rest of the world doesn't. And I actually had to tell him, you're not an accountant anymore, right? He wasn't up to speed on the technology advances that had gone on, the rules, all of those kinds of things. So he got into that, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, and then he stopped trying to move forward, right? And in your case, you took the risk, right? You took the risk, and you went and you did something that moved you forward, right? Your question?
Sorry, you just got a couple of questions coming in, and the one actually relates to what you were just talking about, Bob. This is specific to a person's individual experience. What do you do when you have been taking care of a parent who is on home hospice and you are off of work for a longer period of time because you are taking care of your parent and you go through your grief mode? Do you list that on your resume?
Well, in this person's case, we actually had this conversation. So much like rock star to manager.
I also lost my father during the process, which we could mention. I was also going through grief, but continue.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I understand that question that person's asking.
So if we, in a very difficult way, try to back out the emotion associated with that. If I think about what this gentleman was doing, he was working with doctors. He was working on his mom's health plan and health care plan. He had to deal with understanding the different aspects of how drugs interact with each other. He had to understand, her meals. He basically was the implementer of her health care. And frankly, if I thought about when we talked about with him, like in some ways, he was more of he probably was better suited for a wellness center or a health center than he was for an accountant at that point in his life. But he hadn't thought about it that way, and it was kind of in his mind, too big of a jump. But it was, in a sense, he was running the business of taking care of his parents, and that's the thing, is you got to back the emotion out of it and think about it. What was I doing? I was delivering quality health care. I was managing medicines in compliance with the doctor's orders, right? Those are things that you need to do in a job, right? Yes, it does go on your resume, but you're not putting it down there as I took care of my mom. You're putting it into the terms of what I plan to do in my next job. It's got to sound like your next thing, not your last thing. When you talk about things as if it's your last thing, then people view you as being qualified for your last thing, not your next thing. You always have to have a futuristic way of presenting yourself, and you're seeing that right away. So another question?
Do you have anything to add?
Well, I definitely see sometimes, to add to that, life might take some twists and turns, and it could be unfortunate for someone, like it was for me. I also lost my father through my college. I was a sophomore. And, your life changes. But you got to look at it, I guess, like, Bob is saying, what you end up doing in that time. You might take a break from what you were originally doing, but whatever you do in that time period is also a procedure. It's a learning curve. You know, you're learning this whole other end of life, and then just apply that to your new persona. You know, this is what I did for a year and a half. Even if it was just you're traveling the world, or you're taking care of a parent, or whatever. I mean, part of what pushed me over the edge really to pursue the music was really when my father passed away, because I kind of had this like very, you know, rebel attitude. You know, I was angry, and I was like, you know what, I need to use that anger to fuel me into something, and it wasn't going to be working in a 9-to-5 environment. It was going to, I had all that energy to put towards that. So I think it's about utilizing what happens in life that you maybe don't want to happen, things that are unfortunate or whatever, fortunate. Many things can come and go, and then you have to kind of like just utilize that. And that's being smart about it in life. And I think it's great that you kind of say, well, that counts. Because I thought it didn't count either, just like the guy you were talking about said, oh, I didn't know that this, all of a sudden now I'm, you know, in the health management field or something.
And that field is growing, you know, quickly, so and there's a need for that, clearly. Is there a question?
Got 2 more questions.
Yes.
The first is a 2-parter. In this age of electronic recruiting, how do you make your resume stand out from the hundreds or thousands received for each application? The second part of that question is, and how do you get an employer to overlook the years of your career break?
So let's, I guess the first question.
First part about electronic recruiting.
Yeah, the first
how
one.
How do you stand out?
So it's sort of a similar question to the last question we got. It's all about your, you know, what are they looking for? They're looking for somebody who looks different. So, for example, if I was a waiter at Fridays, let me say that we all have been to something like Fridays, and I said I take orders and I serve food, right? Now what I'm doing is I'm sounding like every other person in the history of planet Earth that has ever served food at Fridays. So sounding common will always work against you, and it will not help you in that whole pile of resumes. You have to sound different. So if I work at Fridays and say I am an assessor of customer requirements, I am a recommender of items that cut across various categories, such as food, such as drink. I am there to enhance the relationship between customers and Fridays. I am there, and by enhancing the relationship and offering more products or different types of products, like you're probably doing at Victoria's Secret, now I'm dealing with customer loyalty and revenue at the same time, revenue generation. In addition, when I cross-sell at Fridays, I know that I'm making more money on the cheesecake than I am on the meal or the beer or wine. So I'm understanding what profitability means. If you're lucky enough to deal with the inventory aspects of a retail or a restaurant environment, there's tons of skills that you're getting with that. Hold yourself accountable for results. Don't tell me what you did, but tell me what you changed, what's different as a result of you being a part of that organization. That's what stands out on a resume. The other thing I will just say is the post and hope approach is not really the right strategy. Certainly you should be applying for everything that you're qualified for, but you need to follow that up with certain forms of networking, whether it be through your online networking, LinkedIn, or attending job fairs like you did, Natasha, or other kinds of industry events. So it's a combination of find jobs and meet people. And what was the second one?
The second part of that was, how do you get an employer to overlook the years of your career break?
So in interviewer terms, no matter who you are, you could be, Natasha, you could be me, you could be anybody here, there's going to be some immediate stereotyping that's going to happen. So they're going to say, oh, she's a rock star, oh, he's an old guy, whatever it is, and those things are going to play out. The only way to beat, and if somebody were to say stereotype you as you're not, you're not motivated because you haven't worked for, you don't know what they're using as the stereotype about you, but one will be there. They're not going to tell you what it is. There's only one way to beat a stereotype, and that is to show that you are helpful and can help that person meet his or her goal. It's
with the stereotype?
No, you try. This is the way you.
So you try not to.
You try to eliminate the stereotype by getting them off thinking about you. If they're thinking about you, the stereotype is fun, right? if they're thinking about themselves and their problems, and that's the skill of the interview, if you can get them to think about how it's not you and me, but it's we and your problems. We're talking about your problems, and let me tell you how I can help you. All of a sudden, my gray hair looks darker, right? And Natasha's 80s rock stuff starts to sound like Sinatra, right? It starts to change, right? The stereotype starts to go away when the other person thinks that you are helpful to meeting their goals. That's the only way to do it. And we all are going to have to deal with that.
All right, we've got another specific question here. I left my corporate accounting job 8 years ago. I then ended up teaching to use my skills while taking care of a parent. So I feel I can still apply for accounting spots. So here's the question. When websites require a wage seeking, I don't know whether to put my old wage levels because the part-time accounting wage is very small relative. Do I say a lower wage requirement since I've been away this long? It is a required field with numeric value.
Okay, excellent. That's an excellent question. I'm going to actually switch to the next slide and talk about expectations, right? So you have this idea of where I was and where I'm going, right? When you are in some form of transition, I think Natasha's story is dramatic in that regard, but so is this question here. When you're in the middle between your old life and your new life, it's I am not where I was, but I'm not where I'm going, right? I'm in the middle now, and it's very gray. Now, you have to be very comfortable in that undefined state of your life that you're in at that point. So while you might think that you're an accountant from 8 years ago, the world is going to look at you differently. Your salary that you commanded 8 years ago may not be the salary that you command now. It's actually the wrong place to start the conversation. The conversation needs to be about what I can offer to you now. Like Natasha with the Victoria's Secret, a little step forward, right, to start to reconnect some of the things that were lost during that gap period. One of the things that I find gets folks in a ton of trouble is defining the form that the next job has to take. It has to look like the one that I had, and that takes a long, long time. I mean, I left Human Resources 5 years ago. I was the head of HR for a company. I was the VP at American Express, their training and development area. I've been at Seton Hall Career Center for 5 years. There is no way that I'm going to that if I sent my resume to a position that I did 5 years ago, there's no way they're going to call me. It's just not going to happen because I look different. And I realize that, and I know that. So if I wanted to get back into it, I would have to go through a different path. I would need to go straight networking. I'd have to understand problems that an employer or an organization has that I am uniquely in position to solve. But I can't define the form of what I'm going to because the form will not look like what I expect it to be. Right? You're in this middle ground of your life. And if you're not, so one of the things I have to say about Natasha is it was a courageous step that she took. It might not seem that way. I go to work for a retail store in a mall situation, but it was courageous to try to create that first piece of structure and we don't know where it's going. We really don't, right? We have to talk about this probably next time we sit down and meet, but we don't know where it's going. And you're okay with that, right? If you're not okay with that, it's going to be very hard to move forward. Does that answer? Is there another question, Kim? Is there a follow-up on that?
If there is, the individual who asked it can
Okay.
definitely follow up. There is another question here. If one gets multiple offers for a job, how can one negotiate for a reasonable offer that fits their needs? For example, higher pay. Okay.
So having been in a few of those in my life on both sides, I will tell you that negotiating is not easy, and nobody's going to give you something without getting something, right? So if somebody offers an amount, they're offering that amount because that's what that job pays, that's what that job is worth in that organization. And if I would like that job to pay more, then I have to tell them what they're getting as a result of paying more, right? So it means, look, because of my experience, I can, be more productive more quickly, or because of my experience, you're not going to have to, invest as much in me in training. or because of my experience, you'll have somebody who has managerial experience on top of your other managers, or whatever it is. You have to define what that value is, or that negotiation is not going to be is not going to be successful. The other thing is you can't go for negotiate every aspect. So there are folks who say, I want these kind of work hours and this kind of salary and this kind of benefits. You have to really know what is the one or two things that are critical for you to negotiate as negotiation points. And if you're lucky to get one of them, I'm telling you, you're lucky, right? So know what it is that are your non-negotiables. If the salary is below a point that you can accept, you can always say no. But keep in mind, when you're in transition, that thing you're saying no to might be that step that's going to move you forward to whatever the next thing's going to be. Your next job is not your last job, and that's a really important. You're in the middle. You're in the middle of where you were and where you're going. All right. Are there other questions coming in? All right. So, so this is really, I think, of all of the my observations of Natasha and her progress. I think this experience about being in this middle ground is really something that you've embraced, probably easier than most. And for those on the call, you're making probably the most dramatic shift of anybody that I've met since I've been here. So, so kudos to you.
Thank you.
Right. So with that, we're sort of done with our content, right? So if there are any other questions or things that you'd like to share, advice.
Yeah, I mean, well, I would like to share that I did it, and I know that, you can't have an ego to do what I did. You can't say, well, how could I do this? Here it is, I was opening up for these rock stars, and now how am I going to go work for someone else? It really takes, when you're really soul searching and you're really trying to figure something out, even the smallest step is a huge step. And I think that you really have to drop all that, that attitude. You really have to be ready for options when you don't know what direction you're going in. And I think trying something new and different, and you have to start from the beginning. Of course, I still do other things. I still keep myself in the other world, which is why maybe I'm not so, it's not like a die-hard situation where I'm saying, oh my goodness, I need this kind of money. I am still making money on the side in the other world. I would be a liar if I said, okay, I don't want anything to do with the entertainment. I kind of knew that for way too long. So for me, where I am now, there are times, where I'm just down on myself and I'm like, I opened the door too far. I just have to walk through it. There's nothing I can do now. Like, am I really ready to start from scratch, something else? I'm trying it out. I've been doing it for a year at the same time as doing the other things. But I do feel like it's kind of pushing me more to really take that next step in that world. And I will say that. It's not pushing me to say, I got to go full, work for some other company. It's saying, what do I have to lose? I've got everything to lose. I've got to really put all my eggs in this basket. There's no more, halving it, where, like, let's say when I was doing it, maybe you need that propeller. You need that moment of break to say, wow, I put everything into this. I put 10 years into this. I'm just going to give it that shot. I'm going to go the extra mile. And that's kind of where I'm going through right now. And I realized that it's a job. It's no longer just, I want to be this, or I have a goal, and it's not a childish dream anymore. It's an actual reality. And I'm looking at it now like it is a job, where before I didn't, because it's what I ended up doing. Like, for example, if you're taking care of a parent or whatever, you end up doing that. You start realizing that that's just not something that happened in life. It's something that became a talent, a job, something you became good at, something you were passionate at. So why not take that road?
We've got some questions coming in. One is a follow-up to the individual who asked about taking care of a parent on hospice. It seems that this individual is stuck on how to listing it. So how would you list the position as, I guess, is on a resume? So would you put FMLA hospice, or how else do you think it should be listed? They did an MHA and it relates to healthcare, so they're
So certainly a caretaker. You
list
pick a title, caretaker, whatever it is. You can call it self-employed. You can call it, under whatever doctor's advice that you're following. So, in terms of how you describe it, you come up with the title, you come up with the company name and the dates, but more importantly is focusing on the skills. That's the most important thing. I'm in that situation now. I got two parents in two, different situations, and it's not easy. It's a management job, and you're managing the finances, you're managing the health plan, you're managing the day-to-day food stuff. You're managing, and what you're managing changes week to week, month to month, based on their health situation that they're in at a point in time. In my dad's situation, he's, there are days that he's so down, that it gets very harder. It becomes more about quality of life for what we think his life is going to be. And then there are times where he comes out of it and he's more lucid. But in a sense, what are you doing? You're creating. So in my dad's part, I consider myself to be a partner with the agency that he's with. It's sort of like they're the vendor that I'm managing, in terms of the care of my dad, but we also have to understand, what the doctors are giving him. And there are basic things like, when does he get his hair cut? The details of it get so intricate. But you're managing, you're analyzing, you're assessing, and what are the outputs? It's quality of life, it's compliance with doctors' plans. Again, it's skills and goals. When you're thinking about yourself, what you're doing today, the two categories that are a must are what are the skills that you're implementing, what are the goals that you're achieving, and the task part of it is less important, right? That's just the way to connect those two concepts of skill and goals.
Here's a good question. How much do you share in the cover letter about your transition to sell yourself or explain a gap?
Right. When we're selling, we are selling based on the needs of the hiring manager. The more we're talking about us, ourselves, the more we are actually hurting ourselves. So a cover letter is exclusively around the value you're providing. You look at the job description and you look at what the goals are associated with that job. You look at the skills about that job and you provide examples of how you've demonstrated those skills in achievement of those goals. And that's it. You don't want to get too much into the story aspect of it, because then the story, if you're opening up the story, then they're spending too much time thinking about you and not enough time thinking about themselves. And that's, whether you're at an interview or whether they're reading your resume, the conversation has to shift quickly to the needs of the other person. An example I like to use is, because job applications is really a selling process. You're selling you, what you represent in terms of skills. If I were to say, if I was going to sell you a car and said that you should purchase this car because I desperately need the money, who would follow that? Who would buy a car based on what I need, right? If I said buy this car because I have great sales skills, who would buy a car because I think I have good sales skills? Nobody would, because I'm talking about the wrong person. I'm talking about me as opposed to them. You should, if you're going to sell a car, you understand what are they looking for in a car. Fuel efficiency, cargo space, and then demonstrate how cars that you have, match those requirements. Give them a test drive, etc. Right? I hope that helps. Right? This is a dangerous thing. Your resume is not about you. Your job search is not about you. It's about you being a solution to somebody else.
Here's a specific question. I received my paralegal certification in 2013. Right now, I am on entry level. I had to take a break due to a health crisis, but I am now ready to re-enter the workforce on a part-time basis for now. How do you suggest I get started?
Same way. Locate jobs, locate people, right? So paralegals are, my understanding is that they're on the uptick right now. So go to your job boards and look for what paralegal jobs are out there. Don't use your LinkedIn. Find Seton Hall alumni who are in law firms who you can reach out to, maybe have coffee with. It's find jobs, find people. I wish I could make it more complicated than that, but that's really, it's hard. It's not complicated, right? It is not an easy thing to do. But you're locating people, sharing with them the kinds of things that you can add benefit to, and hopefully that they are that person or they know somebody who is that person.
Great. Another alum has asked if we could talk about the actual transition. So once you have acquired a position in the new career where maybe your previous skills are not directly transferable, similar to our guest speaker Natasha's situation from music performer to manager of retail sales, what are some of the first things you should focus on once you are in the new seats?
This is in the job or before the job?
Like once you've actually acquired it and talking about the actual transition.
So you may have an answer to this. I know my advice is strongly to understand how success is measured in that organization. Not just your boss's success, but your boss's boss's success and your boss's 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 success. How do they measure success? And tie everything you do to helping them achieve those goals. That's called career management. That's how you progress in a company. If you don't connect yourself to the goals of the people who run the organization, then they will view you as a doer, and you'll stay where you are for a very long time. But if they see you as a, let's call it a player, right, somebody who's able to drive results, that's the first thing you should do. Do you have a thought on that as well?
I definitely think bringing over some skills from whatever it is that you were doing on your time off is also a great thing. It's what's going to make you stand out and make you different. I've seen a lot of people, let's say, just go under the management and do exactly what it is without attributing who they really are. But you see, those 10 years that I put into everything I did, it's like if I can't really use that in this job, or I'm hiding that because I'm feeling, self-conscious about, oh, I don't want to bring that side out of me, you have to be realistic and realize this is what I did, kind of let that leak into this job a little bit where it's needed, and you'll see that somehow, I believe, you will stand out.
That's a great idea. I mean, I think about how even when I left the corporate world and I decided to come to the academic world, I remember I sold myself based on none of my professional background. I sold it based on I ran a basketball league for youth in my town. I coached baseball, and that stuff played more directly to what I was going to do here than my American Express experience. So that's an outstanding point, is use all aspects of your life in yourself.
The next question is more resume, cover letter focused. So what is the amount of pages you should limit your resume to? I was promoted multiple times, and as I try to make my resume along with adding the hospice situation, I'm going into 3 pages. Do I modify my position so it stays at 2 pages? How important is the cover letter? I was told most people don't read them.
So ideally, a resume is 1 page, ideally. Now, if somebody's got more than, say, 10 or 15 years of experience, then 2 pages is acceptable. 3 is generally, unless you're applying for positions that require a CV, which is more of a historical account of your background. A resume is really about accomplishments. So my guess is, for each job that you've probably had 2 or 3 or 4 major accomplishments. You don't want to get too job description-y on a resume. I see resumes that have 20 bullets underneath a job, and those resumes will not get read because you're basically copying and pasting a job description. Nobody cares about the job description. They care about the results of you in that job, right? That translate to them. So 2 pages max, and if you need help with that, certainly they can make an appointment. We can talk through that either by phone or in person. In terms of the cover letter, you should have a cover letter, where all things are equal. People do read them. Understand that they're secondary documents, not primary documents. They tend to read the resume first. They may not read the cover letter if your resume is not interesting. But if it is interesting, then they might look at that as another way to evaluate your candidacy before calling you in. Your cover letter should have 2 main points. Point 1 is why you match the specifics of the position and why you match the specifics of the culture you would be entering. So know the job inside and out, know the company inside and out.
Here's one for you, Bob. What persuaded you to move away from corporate and into higher ed?
It was always in the back of my mind when I didn't want to be mid-50s in the corporate world. I knew that, early on. So I had an opportunity based on my previous company where there was a merger that led to another left-hand turn in my career. The time was right. By the way, the decision was easy. The getting it was hard, right? Because I did not fit any of the stereotypes of academia. So much like what Natasha's doing, although not as complex, was anywhere that anyone who I approached initially was very negative on the idea of having somebody with a corporate background enter an academic field. And it really took a lot of time in terms of translating those other things like the basketball league and a few other things to show that I really was somebody who could be a culture fit. It wasn't easy. Yeah.
Good. If one wants to start their own business or nonprofit, what advice can you offer to beginners who are venturing into a self-employment position?
I mean, that can be different on so many angles because a lot of the time I was getting my money, for example, I was investing. I never took other people's money and invested into my own business. It was it's very different in entertainment. You know, I think like when you want to do, a business where you want direct money and you want to try to make money from it, this was more about the exposure. So, you would invest into getting the goals. And so, I would take money and move it from one, let's say, job I had working in the nightclub industry, because that's what I did at the time. Just 2-3 nights a week, or even 2 nights a week, I was able to make more than people were making in 5 days, which is another thing I haven't really talked about. But it kind of gave me that time and the money to be able to move it, live on it, live very comfortably, and also invest it into what I wanted. It wasn't for selfish reasons. It wasn't just because it was honestly because I saw an outcome and a positive outcome for others, and I knew it would eventually be something that was a people helper, Mm-hmm. Communication is a big thing for me. That was my degree, and I think that was the form I was using. It was music or film production or whatever it is that you want to use. There's different facets of how you can do that, but it all depends. I mean, if you want to start a business where like selling, so I honestly don't know anything about that. This was all just for.
But in a way, I mean,
it does get you.
You had a business plan. You had to have a business plan.
You have to have a business plan, and obviously on that resume of what I've done and achieved is what gets me to the next level. Mm-hmm. And so if I have the money to do this, or let's say produce this, the next time let's say get a job offer, it's right there on the table because I already produced the right kind of a resume, like let's say a video or something like that. That will get me the next job. Right. So it's kind of like it just happens sporadically. It's a very different thing with entertainment. So I don't know, maybe you could answer that.
You're absolutely right. I mean, you need a plan. You need a plan. What is the product? What kind of customers you're going after? Make sure people are looking at your plan. How much money do you need? Is it coming out of your pocket? Is it coming out of somebody else's pocket? You would need to get some guidance from people who have actually started businesses. There's no doubt about that.
So we've got about 5 more minutes. I don't know if there are any final thoughts that you would like to share on this topic, or any last words?
If one takeaway you want to leave them with?
Yes.
Well, I just want to honestly thank you, Bob, for I was able to come here and you kind of gave me that confidence. There was a time that, in this break, a person can get depressed, a person can really feel really low. You don't realize maybe what you've been doing that whole time is actually a talent, or going to be able, you'll be able to use that, let's say, on your resume. And so you really made me realize that. And I think it's wonderful that Seton Hall has you here because you're very passionate about it. I have come here to the Career Center before, and I have to say you're the person who really went out of your way, because you care enough and a lot. And it's helping me as we go day by day, immensely. So I think it's important, to, I guess, follow up with your peers and, with the university. I think that Seton Hall is very willing to help all the alumni, and I could say I'm really happy for that. So thank you.
No, isn't she great? By the way, I might want to hear a round of applause out there. Which is amazing.
I wish there was an applause button, but unfortunately we don't have one.
So that's
anything
it
from you, Bob, before we?
I just have to say, thank you for what you were saying, but I mean, really, it's your passion and your courage that has really been the driver, in my view. Because this conversation, we can have this with many people. Natasha's putting it into action and is very open to where she might head.
Yeah, ultimately it does take the person to say, I want help, I want direction, and you've got to be open to it. You might not be able to find that on your own. You might need to call upon other people, and that's the first step.
All right, so thank you. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Well, we're getting a lot of comments coming in of thanks and that it was a great webinar. So thank you both, again, for doing this today. To our audience, thank you all for your questions. It was very conversational, which is always our goal for these webinars. So we thank you for sending in those questions. Just so that you know, tomorrow you will be receiving a survey, and we really appreciate your feedback, any that you can give on this particular webinar. We also, at the end of the survey, ask for your input and feedback on some topics that you might like to see for future webinars. So we hope that you will take the time to fill out that brief survey. As you know, this webinar is just one in our ongoing webinar series. We are very fortunate and able to offer you one webinar a month. And our next webinar coming up will be on Thursday, April 21st. And the topic is on what a lot of us, I think, can do better, and that is work-life balance. So we hope that you'll join us again. It will be at noon Eastern Time. You can find more information on that webinar and others coming up in the series at www.shu.edu/go/webinars. So again, thank you for joining us, and the comments keep coming in. Everyone really loved it. So thank you again both for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.